Have you ever sat alone in your room, in silence, and felt it? That faint sound, a whisper, not from outside your window, not from your phone, but from inside your head. A voice that isn't yours, but still speaks with such familiarity that it unsettles your very soul. Some people hear them only once, a single word, a fleeting sentence, a murmur that vanishes as quickly as it came. Others live with them constantly. Shadows of voices following them into sleep, into their waking hours, into every corner of their lives. But the real question, the one that chills the spine, is not what the voices say, but why you hear them in the first place. Tonight, we enter the labyrinth of the human mind, and in that labyrinth, voices hide. For centuries, hearing voices was not a medical condition. It was a mystery, a curse, a blessing, a sign of madness or of divine revelation. Imagine living in a time when the invisible was feared, when science had no answers. A farmer in the Middle Ages who heard voices would not call a doctor, he would call a priest. A woman who claimed she heard angels whispering might be revered or burned alive. The phenomenon has always terrified us because it blurs the line between the real and the unreal. If you can't trust your own thoughts, then what can you trust? Let me take you back. In ancient Greece, Socrates himself claimed he had a daimonion, a guiding spirit that whispered warnings into his mind. In Christian mysticism, saints often described voices of God, the Virgin Mary, or the angels speaking directly to them. In darker tales, witches and sorcerers confessed under torture to hearing the voices of the devil, commanding them to do unspeakable things. And then there are the voices in myth. The Oracle of Delphi, speaking in riddles, believed to channel the gods. The Norse shamans, who heard whispers of Odin in the wind. In every culture, in every corner of the earth, humans have heard voices and tried to explain them. But were they divine? Or were they symptoms of something deeper, hidden within the folds of the brain? Fast forward to today. We live in an age of MRI scans, psychiatry, and neuroscience. And yet, the mystery has not gone away. People still hear voices, sometimes fleeting, sometimes constant, sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrifying. A young woman hears the soft encouragement of her late mother. A soldier returns from war, haunted by the voices of his fallen comrades. A man walks down a crowded street, and though no one is near him, he hears his name being called over and over again. The voices follow no rules. They can sound like strangers, or like people you love. They can whisper secrets, or scream threats. They can guide you, or destroy you. And so the question deepens. Are these voices hallucinations, the product of a fractured mind, or are they the echoes of something far stranger, something outside ourselves? Here lies the paradox. For some, hearing voices brings torment. They are stalked by cruel, mocking words that erode their sanity. For others, voices bring comfort, insight, even creativity. History's greatest writers, artists, and prophets have claimed inspiration came not from themselves, but from unseen voices speaking through them. So, what if hearing voices is not simply a disorder, but a human experience, one with as much potential for genius as it has for despair? In the episodes to come, we will peel back the layers. We will enter the psychology of hallucinations, the neurology of the auditory cortex, the fractures of trauma, that can split the mind into echoes of itself. But before we explain the science, we must descend deeper into the mystery. Because only by facing the shadows, the myths, the fears that humanity has carried for thousands of years, can we begin to understand why voices speak at all. So tonight, as you lie in bed, ask yourself, when the world goes silent, when no one is near, and yet you hear your name whispered from the dark, are you truly alone? Or has someone or something been waiting to speak? Stay with me. In the next chapter, we step further into the unknown, and the answers may disturb you more than the voices themselves. The labyrinth we entered last time was built of shadows and fear. Tonight, we step deeper into the architecture of the mind itself. Close your eyes. Imagine a vast corridor stretching endlessly. Behind each door lies a memory, a thought, a secret you've long forgotten. Most of those doors stay locked, but sometimes one opens, and from the darkness behind it, a voice emerges. What if I told you that your brain, the very engine of your reality, is capable of creating entire conversations that don't exist? That the most terrifying voice you'll ever hear may not come from the world outside, but from within your own skull. One of the deepest roots of hearing voices lies in trauma. When the human mind is pushed to its limits, especially in childhood, it doesn't always heal in neat, straight lines. Instead, it builds walls. It buries memories. It hides what it cannot process. But pain never truly disappears. Sometimes that pain begins to speak. Psychologists have found that many people who hear voices aren't mad at all. They're survivors. Survivors of abuse, neglect, or overwhelming stress. Their brains, desperate to protect them, split reality into fragments. Those fragments can become whispers, sometimes cruel, sometimes protective, sometimes both. Imagine it. You're not just remembering a harsh word spoken years ago. You're hearing it again, now, as if it's being repeated in your ear. The past doesn't stay buried. It walks beside you, invisible, and it talks. Then there is schizophrenia, the most infamous name associated with voices. A disorder where thought, perception, and identity fracture like shattered glass. In the quiet of a hospital room, a young man sits alone. He rocks back and forth. He hears a stranger's voice warning him of danger. He argues with it, pleads with it, shouts at it. But no one is there. Schizophrenia is not simply hearing voices. It is living inside a fractured mirror. The auditory cortex, the region of the brain that processes sound, activates as if real words were spoken even when the room is silent. The mind mistakes its own internal dialogue for an outside presence. And yet, for the person living through it, the voice is undeniable, as clear as the sound of your own breathing. Think of your auditory cortex as a vast hall. Normally, it only lights up when real sound enters your ears. But in some minds, it flickers on its own, replaying memories, stitching fragments together, conjuring phantom words. The brain becomes a haunted house. Empty rooms echo with footsteps. Silent halls fill with whispers. The strangest part, sometimes the voices reveal knowledge the conscious mind didn't notice. They point out patterns, connect fragments of memory, and uncover details the person didn't realize they had absorbed. That's why the voices often feel alien, because they speak faster, sharper, stranger than normal thought. Another force is dissociation, the mind's survival trick when reality becomes too much. To endure overwhelming pain, the self splits. Different parts take on different roles. Over time, these fragments of identity can become so distinct that they feel like strangers. They argue, they command, they soothe, they attack. Each one has a voice. For someone living with dissociation, it feels like being in a crowded room where you're never quite alone. Your mind is a theater, and the cast never stops talking. But here's where things become even stranger. The content and tone of the voices are shaped by the culture you live in. In some societies, people report friendly, playful voices, companions in their solitude. In others, the voices are violent, judgmental, cruel. The brain draws on its environment, using familiar symbols and social patterns to clothe the voices in recognizable forms. Same phenomenon, different masks. It means the voices you hear are not random. They are reflections, mirrors of the world you were raised in. Not all voices torment. For some, they inspire. Many people describe voices that guide them towards solutions, insights, or bursts of creativity they didn't know they had. These voices may be unsettling, yes, but they can also be strangely useful. They hint at the brain's ability to process information beneath awareness and present it in the form of an other. This is the paradox. The same phenomenon that can unravel a life can also fuel breakthroughs. For some, it's torment. For others, it feels like a hidden ally. Whether born of trauma, schizophrenia, dissociation, or cultural influence, the voices are real to the people who hear them. They carry weight. They have power. They can build or destroy. That's the hardest truth. The mind that creates the voices is also the mind that must live with them. And sometimes, the voice in the dark isn't an intruder. It's a part of you, speaking in a language you don't yet understand. We've seen the psychology. We've seen the neurology. We've seen how voices can be cruel or kind, destructive or illuminating. But the deeper question remains. Why do they feel so alien? Why do they sometimes reveal knowledge beyond our conscious reach? In Part 3, we'll explore what it means to live with the voices and whether they can be transformed from enemies into companions. We'll step further into the gray zone, where science and survival meet, and where the answers may disturb you even more than the voices themselves. For now, as the screen fades to black, remember this. When you hear a whisper in the silence, it may not be coming from outside at all. It may be the echo of yourself calling from the shadows. We've traveled through history. We've entered trauma, schizophrenia, dissociation, and the haunted corridors of the brain. And yet, one question still lingers. If voices are real to those who hear them, how do you live with them? How do you fight something that lives inside your mind? And here lies the most chilling twist. Sometimes, you don't fight them at all. Sometimes, you learn to live with them. Modern psychology no longer treats every voice as madness. Therapists and researchers have discovered something radical. The key is not always silence, but dialogue. One approach, called voice dialogue or compassionate listening, encourages people to speak to their voices instead of running from them. A therapist might ask, "What does the voice want? Why is it speaking to you? What would happen if you answered back?" For some, this transforms the relationship. The terrifying inner critic becomes a wounded part of the self. The relentless command becomes a clue to unresolved pain. By facing the voice, the person begins to take back control. Others learn strategies to anchor themselves when voices overwhelm. Listening to music louder than the whisper. Snapping a rubber band against the wrist to break the spiral. Writing down what the voices say, then reading it back to realize their patterns. Simple techniques, but in the middle of the storm, they can make the difference between drowning and staying afloat. In many cases, medication plays a role. Antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, antidepressants, they don't erase the phenomenon, but they can turn down the volume. For someone tormented day and night, that silence can feel like salvation. For others, it is bittersweet, because the voices, once gone, leave behind an emptiness, a silence, too deep. What most people don't realize is this: hearing voices is not as rare as we think. Studies suggest a significant portion of the population has experienced them at least once. Some live with them constantly. Communities have formed, support groups where people gather not to cure, but to share. They compare stories, they find patterns, they realize they are not alone. And here is something powerful. When shame is lifted, the voices often lose their grip. Isolation feeds them. Connection starves them. But even with therapy, medication, and support, some questions remain unanswered. Why do the voices sometimes know things the conscious mind doesn't? Why do they speak in languages a person has forgotten but once knew? Why do they sometimes predict events before they happen? Science can measure brain waves, but it cannot fully decode why the voices behave with such autonomy, such strangeness. Some neuroscientists suggest it is the brain's way of processing unconscious data, hidden observations, unnoticed cues. The voices sound prophetic, but they are simply the mind calculating faster than we realize. And yet, is that all? There are stories, documented, baffling stories, where voices have saved lives. A voice warns a woman not to get on a bus. She doesn't. Minutes later, the bus crashes. A voice tells a man to see a doctor. He ignores it until it grows relentless. The checkup reveals a hidden tumor. Coincidence? Pattern recognition? Or something stranger? Science has no definitive answer, and so the mystery lingers in the shadows. Hearing voices can be torment. It can drive a person to the edge of despair, but it can also guide, reveal, inspire. The same phenomenon that has filled hospital wards has also fueled art, literature, music, and invention. The brain is both the prisoner and the escape artist, the tormentor and the savior. And that is the unsettling truth. The voices are not simply illness. They are part of the human experience, a spectrum, a possibility, a reminder that the mind is far more complex and far more mysterious than we want to admit. So the next time silence falls and you think you hear a murmur just beyond the edge of sound, remember this. It could be trauma speaking. It could be your brain misfiring. It could be a fragment of yourself cut off long ago. Or it could be something else, something that science has not yet named. Whether tormentor or guide, shadow or ally, the voices remind us of a chilling fact. We are never fully alone inside our own minds. And maybe, just maybe,
That is the scariest truth of all.
Step deeper with us into the shadows of the mind. Subscribe now and don't miss what waits in the dark.